up, everybody? It's April Justine here with Bloods by Design, and you are listening to Strictly Shorties, the podcast about blood python and short tails, and only blood python and short tails, with everything you need to know just about them. Because frankly, I'm selfish and I love this species so much. And let's talk about them. Today we are going to be talking about feeding. These are fat, heavy-bodied snakes, and overfeeding is so easy. And I am bringing on my friend Dan Magano of Magano Snakes. Dan, is that your business name? It is, right?
Yeah, I just use that. I don't really have an actual business name. It's just me. So.
Okay. Well, hello and welcome. How are you doing tonight?
Not too bad. Yourself?
I'm good. This is round 2 of us trying to give this a go. We'll see how it works out for us. Frankly, I think this is going to be a better show. We were both kind of just a mess the last time.
Yeah, that is a fact. So I was thinking to myself, we can't do worse, but then I thought to myself, that might be a challenge. So
I know, right? Oh, goodness. Okay. So how's your season going? What's going on with you?
Season's going really well. It's really compressed this year, which, to be honest, I usually hate. I like my season stretched out a little bit more where you have stuff kind of hatching throughout the season. Right now, it's like a 6-week blitz of everything hatching. So it gets a little bit much between trying to, get them established, got stuff coming out of the incubator, trying to get pictures, get stuff up, get stuff sexed, get stuff feeding. So right now, so far, I've had 4 clutches have hatched so far. I have 1 clutch that is basically due to hatch now. Today's day 58, so it could pretty much pip any day now. Although it's weird. My incubator seems to be running a little on the hot side this year.
What's hot for you?
Pushing up towards like 88.
Okay. And
even though I have it set lower, I have multiple thermostats in there, but it seems to be like it'll say it's set at 87 and it's running 88. But my stuff's been hatching later, which is weird. So I've had a lot of pips at like day 64, 65, which is not what you'd expect with running that temperature. That's more of what I'd expect if I was down at like 86.
Right.
But basically these animals do whatever they want. So I'm just staying out of the way as best I can and managing it. But so far the season's been fantastic. The skunk line stuff that came out is phenomenal. It exceeded my expectations tenfold. Like I had a vision of what I wanted, and it's so much better than that. So now it's just a challenge of where I'm going to take that to the next level, which obviously is going to take several years, but still very exciting there. That clutch that's coming right now is from Lilith, so I'm excited about that. And then I have Sumatrans wrapping up the season in about 2 to 3 weeks approximately. They're on like day 45 or 46, I think, so they're getting close.
Well, that's awesome. Sounds much better than mine. Mine's kind of a flop, but I had that freeze back in February, so I don't know. That probably affected some of the females that had eggs in them. Some of them just didn't go, and that's totally fine. Try again next season because they're fat and chunky and good to go. I have 4 eggs from my caramel Sumatran. They'd be het caramel, and I am actually super stoked about those. Those eggs are plump and huge and beautiful and should be starting to get dimply any day and then hatch. So I'm really excited to see what those look like. I like Sumatrans anyway. They're like kind of my favorite. Yeah. So I'm really excited to see those.
It's nice to have snakes that don't want to kill you out of the egg typically. And even when they do, it's like a week or 2 and they're just like, okay, this is cool.
Yeah, like fine.
The blood pythons I hatched this year are the most maniacal animals I've ever hatched to date.
Uh-huh.
And like it's a level of anger I've never seen in something so small. And of course, the one that I like the best, the one that's like an absolute 100% keeper, is the meanest one in the whole clutch because that's the way that goes.
How it is. Yeah, always.
I mean, just absolutely hates my guts. And it gets so angry that it literally like almost flips over backwards as it's like seething with rage that you would even look at it, let alone touch it. And it was funny because when I take them out of the incubator, I throw everything into like a quick soak real quick just to wash the vermiculite off, clean some of the egg goo off of them, gives them a chance to get hydrated, right out of the egg.
Yeah.
And it was floating. It looked like almost like the way like a cottonmouth floats down the river. It was just sitting there with its head in the air. Yeah, it was head in the air, like waiting for me to get close enough to bite me. And I'm like, Jesus, man. I'm like, how are you this mad out of the egg?
Like, come on.
most babies you get like 24 hours before they even settle into being mean because they're so like, everything's so new and they're just so confused and their siblings are around, so they're not typically biting each other. So they kind of have like a little 24-hour window where they're not being total shitbags. But these ones did not play by that rule. I had one try to get me twice while it was hipped sitting in the egg, and I was in there trying to move other babies out of the incubator. Like it came out of the egg after me. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Never seen one so mad. Yeah, I've had that happen once in how many years, and that one came after me twice. So,
I haven't had any like that bad, but yeah, I will say that most of my collection that I had a little bit of like feedback coming there. Sorry, most of my collection that I have, honestly, they're kind of sassy, and some people say it's just you, April. I'm like, nah, I don't think I do anything crazy. But I also pick the ones that I pick them for their pattern and their genetics and not necessarily their personality. However, I believe I'm going to be changing that now because I'm just too old to deal with all that and I just don't want to anymore.
It makes a difference after a while. There's some animals when it's unpleasant every time for both of you.
Yep.
And it's like, what are we even doing here? And some of them, it's frustrating because you can have a total stranger come in and pick that same snake up and that snake's totally chill. And you're like, really, dude?
Yeah.
Like, I've spent my whole life catering to you, and this is the thanks I get. But that's just how it is sometimes. Just certain animals don't click with certain people. Sometimes a change in scenery just kind of flips their personality a little bit. And it can go the other way, too. You send a snake to somebody that's super nice, and then they get it, and it's a demon. And they're like, well, you lied. It's like, no.
It's like, I promise I didn't. And it was eating just fine, too. So the fact you can't get it to eat, I don't know.
It happened to one of the snakes I sent to Rob. Like, it was a demonic animal for him. And, like, I literally sent him videos before I brought that snake up to him, like, of it sitting on my shoulder going around the house. We're out in the yard hanging out. I'm like, I don't know, dude. It just hates your guts. And I went up there a couple times. I don't know what happened
when I shipped it over, but...
Yeah. No, I went up there a couple times and picked it right up, and it was fine. And it just wanted to kill him. And it took like a year and a half, I think, before that snake stopped like trying to kill Rob all the time.
That's crazy.
I also think too he was at Nerd at the time, and Nerd, their whole facility is just way hotter than what mine is.
Sure, so that's totally possible.
I think part of it was that too, that the snake was just more irritated there, and then the relationship I had with that animal was enough to where I could come up and mess with it, and it wasn't acting out, but stranger danger was not happening, I guess. So.
I guess you taught the child well.
Yeah.
Be fearful of strangers. All right, well, let's get into the topic of tonight, which is feeding. You have a great video on your YouTube channel, and you have a really good, informative YouTube channel as is. It's still active, right? You're still uploading? Because I still get stuff from you. Okay.
Yeah, I still get stuff from you, too, even though you're not uploading.
I know.
Sends me something like, this is 18 months old. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I know. I've been terrible. It just takes up so much bandwidth on my phone or my laptop, and it's just a pain in the butt to upload. I really don't mind actually videotaping and editing, but it's the uploading, man.
So one thing that I found, too, because YouTube was taking up massive amounts of space on my phone, deleting the app and reinstalling got rid of that problem for me. It still uploads terribly slow, but yeah, I mean, at one point my phone, I have like the 128 whatever, and it was like telling me I had no memory. I'm like, how? And
right.
YouTube was taking up like 54 of those or something. I'm like, what the F? So I just deleted the app and reinstalled it, and all of a sudden it was taking up like one. I'm like, huh. And
did it go faster? Because that's my issue, like uploading for that.
It's hit or miss, and it's weird because I find, which doesn't make sense to me, but I am not tech savvy. But I find that if I'm watching something on YouTube, like I'll cast it to my television. Yeah. So if it's got traffic going both ways, where I'm like downloading something while it's uploading, it seems to upload faster, which doesn't make sense to me. You think that would slow it down. But once again, I don't understand technology, and that's just what I found, that if I actually have something else going on, it seems to move faster.
Well, I'll try that. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I couldn't explain it, and maybe it's supposed to work that way. I don't know. But that's just what I found that seems to work for me.
I think it'd be weird if I did this random, 5-minute video. Like, hey, just testing, 1, 2, 3.
This is a test.
Yeah. And then take it down real quick.
No, and then just stand there and make that sound with your mouth, like that testing noise from the television commercials or whatever back in the day.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Oh, that'd be terrible. People would hate me. If you're old enough to know what this is.
Yeah, right.
All right. Anyway, on your YouTube channel, you have a great video. It's an old video.
Yeah.
One of your, gosh, well, it's not one of your first by any means, but it's
No, but
one
it's
of
like
the older
probably
ones.
the first. It's the first quarter of my channel for sure, if not
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah, but it's really good, and it goes through feeding, overfeeding, different food types, how the body changes when they do get fed. So I like to go into that because I think it was a very good presentation of the information that I think is pretty accurate. So let's first start off with, do you do a feeding schedule for your animals?
So I really don't. And now I go through phases of stuff, and I really feed pretty sporadically, I think is the best word for it. And in that video, I know I actually rewatched it tonight too. And aside from the fact that I said about 600 times and I wanted to reach through and strangle myself, it was put together fairly well as far as the content goes. But, I basically try to vary everything from size to prey type to, frequency. I try to really kind of throw the kitchen sink at them because to me that's a more natural approach to what they're designed to do. These animals aren't designed to sit somewhere and have, a consistent same size meal thrown at them every single week on the dot. It's just not the way that their body is designed to function. And us trying to kind of force them into what we're comfortable with doesn't really make sense to me. It's too far from how they're built. I always say that we're keeping in captivity, and captivity is not the wild, and there are some differences there. But there's certain aspects of the animal's, biological makeup that we have to cater to in some form if we want them to, survive the way they're supposed to.
Right. Yeah. So we recorded this the first time, like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago.
Sounds about right.
And so I didn't feed my snakes at all that week. And then this week I ended up doing small rats because I was like, this is fine. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, I just fed like 30 right before we came on because, I haven't fed the stuff that's on like medium-sized rats, just as a reference point, in probably 3 to 4 weeks now. So I was like, I'm going to feed tonight. I started thawing this afternoon, but, I'm a Braves fan. We have a doubleheader today. So I watched the first game while the rats were thawing, and then I was like, oh shit, I didn't change the water or do anything. So I got them rolling. And the second game started, and I was watching the second game actually right before we came on, and I was feeding. We were up 4-2 last I saw, so hopefully we hold on. But yeah, I really do try to feed sporadically. I try to adjust the prey size and the prey type. And one of the things I know we discussed last time, and I discussed in the video, is understanding the fat content breakdown of the prey items that you're feeding and how the age of a prey item affects that fat content as much as the type. So if everybody's just feeding retired breeder rodents, for example, rats, all those animals are higher in fat content than a small or a medium or even a large rat that's younger, just because of the way, mammals' bodies work. As we get older, we start to store more fat, we're less active. Our metabolism changes a little bit. We don't process things the same way. So these prey items are the same way. So if everything's a retired breeder and it's 2, 3, 4 years old, well, now that fat content's higher than that younger, leaner animal. And so even feeding an absolutely perfect meal size on a perfect schedule, you still could be tipping the scales a little too high in fat content. And, as we know, fatty liver disease is something that really, really takes a lot of snakes far before their time. And you see all these people post videos and pictures of these necropsies or autopsies, whatever you want to call them. And, you see how the fat is with these animals, and they're so streamlined and all their organs and everything are inside of that track. And so once that fat fills up, those can't function the way they're supposed to. It compresses on their lungs. It makes it harder for them to breathe. And then we mix that with too small of an enclosure, and they're not able to stretch that lung out. They're never really able to clear that out, and then that causes respiratory issues. So there's all kinds of things that can happen just by, your best intention at feeding, but not really paying attention to what and how often you're feeding.
And you made a really good point, too, that with snakes that they hold their fat under their rib cages, where humans, the fat is on top of the rib cage, so you can see it more. But with the snakes, it's more hidden, so you might not even, it might look like a healthy size, but it actually is still full of fat.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where those pictures to me are, you know, they always say a picture's worth 1,000 words, but it really is when you actually see all that fat sitting there and you look at that. And, you know, as I discussed in that video with the Burmese pythons that they did these scientific experiments with down mostly based in Florida and everything, as they've been trying to, you know, research ways to kind of combat the problem down there. We're actually gaining a lot of knowledge from that, you know, within the hobby if we actually pay attention to it, of course. But, you know, we found out through research that when these snakes are eating, I think it's within like 6 hours of them taking a meal, like right away their body starts to kick into overdrive. And within like 6 hours or so, they're up and running where their body's moving towards like max capacity. And they actually alter the genetic code within their body that, you know, normally tells your heart to get such a diameter or such a weight. Now all of a sudden that can go up 40 to 100%. And so it needs space to expand. If all that fat's in there and that those organs are trying to expand, that's going to press down on them, create problems, could cut off blood flow, circulation issues, all those kinds of things, as well as, once again, the oxygen deprivation. And in order to eat, they actually increase the oxygen flow as well. So once again, you could be restricting that and causing problems with that process. And, you know, one of the things that they discovered was that it's taking about 10 to 14 days for these animals' systems to come back down to their default setting and back down to normal. And so these people that are feeding every single week are never, ever allowing these animals' bodies to get to a state of rest. They're in a constant state of stress. And, you know, I don't think you have to be a genius to figure out that a constant state of stress isn't good for anything. You know, they call stress a silent killer, and stressing an animal's organs and body functions, you know, around the clock, 24/7 for 10 years is going to burn that animal out that's meant to live 30.
Right.
So I think people really need to kind of grasp that concept and understand what we're doing. And I hope eventually they'll do research into other species because, you know, right now Burmese pythons are kind of the base point that we have. But I don't think Burms have the slowest metabolism. I think bloods and shorttails are slower. I think some boa species are probably slower. And then you have stuff like reticulated pythons that are a little bit faster. And then, you know, obviously colubrids tend to be much faster. But it gives us a base point and something to think about. And with adult snakes that are healthy and have good weight, why do we need to feed them all that often? They're never, even your colubrid species are probably not eating as often as we're feeding them in captivity, and they're getting less exercise. They're not out hunting. So that's got to be considered as well.
Yeah, and with adults, I find with blood pythons especially, with them being so sedentary and their metabolism being as slow as it is, for one, the meal you do give them, they seem to use up a lot of it. So that's one thing. But I feel like they don't really lose weight if they go for a good amount of time without the food. You know, so
Right.
they can really keep it on. So it's not so much a concern. Now, if they're younger and if they're babies, it might be slightly concerning, but you just want to keep an eye on their weight,
Yeah,
you know?
babies, obviously, I think their system's kind of built a little more, take a little bit more stress early on because obviously the goal is to get up to
The
size.
big size.
Yeah, in a reasonable amount of time because then you have less predators, then you're able to breed and propagate. So the first 2 or 3 years, you have a lot more room for error. But after that third year, their metabolism starts to slow down. And by like 5 years old, it's really low. And then from then on, it's really low for the rest of their life. And what you just talked about kind of brings up two things that I discussed, one in that video and one in another. The one in that video, of course, my brain is going to train wreck right now. I'm not going to know what I'm talking about. But one of them where you said that they really, I know. So you talked about how if you don't feed them for a while, they don't really tend to lose weight. So when you have an animal that's overweight and you want to take weight off of it, if you stop feeding it, what you're going to do is slow that animal's metabolism down even more. And so now, just like with us, if we were to try to starve ourselves, it triggers your body to hold on to fat and hold on to things because now it's concerned that it's not going to get sustenance to replace it and it needs to maximize what it has available. And so snakes work in a similar fashion where if you just stop feeding them, it's going to slow that metabolism down. They're going to get less active and they're going to conserve their energy and they're not really going to drop the weight you want them to drop. You need to try to get them encouraged to be more active, and that might mean taking them out of their enclosure and spending some time with them, or just finding a way to get them to move within the enclosure, but also feeding them smaller meals on a somewhat consistent basis. So you might have a 20-pound blood python, 25-pound blood python, whatever, and you're just going to give it a smaller medium rat, just enough to keep that metabolism running, keep the body recognizing the fact that food's coming in. And you do that every 2 or 3 weeks or something. It's not enough, food where it's going to pack weight on the snake, but it'll keep that metabolism up and running, coupled with the exercise. And it takes a long time. It's not easy to take weight off of these animals. It's easy to put it on. It's not easy to take it off. So you really kind of want to prevent that as opposed to, deal with it once it happens. And
all I'm thinking when you say that is like, same, me too.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I look at food, I get fatter. I work out for 6 months and I get fatter too. It's a weird process. It's absolutely true. But yeah, so the second part of what you said was that they do a lot with the meals they have. And I did a whole video on the adaptive ballast theory and why bloods and shorttails hold on to their stool for so long. And part of the reason that they do it, supposedly, there's no science hasn't absolutely figured it out yet, but these theories to me make a lot of sense. One, the longer you hold on to it, the more nutrients you can suck out of that one meal. So bloods and shorttails absolutely do a good job of getting everything out of whatever they eat, which also means they don't need to eat as much because they're really maximizing it. When you feed, say you have a rat snake, you feed it, that thing's pooping in 4 or 5 days after that meal, maybe 7 days. Blood pythons sometimes notoriously go 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, upwards of a year. There's been instances of 14 months without having a bowel movement. And so the secondary part of that reason that they think, which is A, why the snakes are structured the way they are, and B, why they hold on to it, is they think that they're actually using it as a ballast. And so what it allows them to do by holding on to that stool is it allows them to basically anchor themselves and take on larger sized prey. So now you have a snake that maybe was 20 pounds, but if it's holding on to 2 or 3 pounds of waste, now it's got more weight in the back. So when it goes to strike, it's anchored better to the ground. It gives it a little bit more weight so the animal that it's trying to overpower can't drag it off. And then basically the cool thing for them is, as opposed to growing larger and now having more body mass to have to, require a caloric intake, you've got all this waste in there that doesn't take anything from your body. So you're not having to feed extra muscles and extra fat and extra, tissue and blood flow and all this stuff. So it allows them to stay smaller, but overpower larger prey. So while it's a theory, it makes 150% sense to me that that's a really good evolutionary advantage to, not need food as often, to be able to up your meal size that you can overpower, and with minimal, responsibility from your body to take care of that extra weight. So it's a really, really kind of genius thing that these animals are doing that, we have to keep in mind in captivity. So if I have a snake that's really gone a long period of time, which honestly in my collection doesn't happen very often, I would say my snakes are pretty regular every 1 to 3 months. But if they really have gone a long period of time, sometimes I'll swim them, sometimes I'll take them out in the yard if the weather's nice, get them moving around. Because a lot of times if you get them moving around enough, they'll drop at least something, even if it's, they'll pee, whatever you want to call it. I know that technically snakes don't pee, but these snakes pee a lot.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many people argue, no, urates are all hard. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. Like, you want to come play in an inch of water
flood.
That's in the bottom of my
zone.
snake's cage? Yeah. And I've had that conversation with several people. Oh, well, snakes don't pass liquid. I'm like, oh my God. Listen, I know it's not technically urine because it doesn't pass through whatever it was, the gallbladder or whatever that makes it considered urine or whatever that is. I'm not
You're like, but this is liquid waste.
Yeah, it smells like pee. It looks like pee. It floods the entire cage. It really can be overpowering.
It smells worse than pee. It's gross.
It can be very overpowering.
If you have a whole bunch of different species, if you keep bloods and other species, I had this, 'cause I had an anaconda before, and I could tell if it was the anaconda that pooped, if it was my corn snakes that pooped, or if it was my bloods that pooped.
Yeah.
It was gross.
Yeah, no, I can recognize species too from over the years, and also sometimes I can tell you what they ate too, because when you give them birds, it smells different coming out. Guinea pigs can smell a little different coming out, so it's I don't know where that life skill comes in handy, but I've got it.
Oh, very proud of you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a shit sniffer.
So, you just brought up again feeding different prey items. Now, I don't do that because I don't really have the availability or the budget necessarily, depending upon where, I'm sourcing this from. So mine mostly, actually always, just get mice or rats, and that's what they get. But for you and varying up the diet, which I think is a great idea, I just can't do it. Can't is hard. I'm not going out of my way to do it. Let's say that. But have you found that any of them get stuck on one piece of food item? Like they only want chickens or they only want, whatever it might be, guinea pigs, like you said.
Yeah, it can happen. Bloods and short tails, I have not really had it happen with. I've seen it happen with like adult male berms where once they get on chickens, sometimes that's what they want. My male Australian water python, as a matter of fact, he's the only one that didn't eat tonight that I thawed for. But he's weird. Like he likes to hang out underneath his water dish, and he's got a big water dish and he circles around underneath there and stuffs himself underneath of it. And, so in order to feed him, I have to pick it up. And once you pick it up, it pisses him off. So then he doesn't want to eat anything but chicks at that point. If he's out and about, he'll take rats. But it's just one of those quirks where if he's pissed off, he wants to throw a fit, and his Achilles heel is chicks. If you put a chicken there, he's like, oh man, I gotta have that. So he'll come out of his latitude. But like tonight, he wouldn't take the rat. If I had thought a chick for him, he would have eaten it. But he will take rats. You just have to have them in the right situation. And what's really annoying is I like to have them on substrate, but he kind of prefers paper. Mm-hmm. And he prefers his paper to be like stupid dirty. And when it's stupid dirty, that snake will eat every time. He's like so much more relaxed, easygoing. But it's like, I don't want to leave my snake filthy all the time. But that's what he wants. Yeah, he literally mounds up the paper into like a paper mache pile, and he'll poop all in it and piss all in it, and then he just loves it. And I'm like, dude, this is not the way. Like,
I have a Borneo that's kind of like that. It's like I give her fresh paper, fresh water. She instantly floods the cage, not only with water, but also pee, and then poop smears. It's just... Yeah, it's awful.
They'll do it every time consistently. And
it's like, I don't want to clean you twice. I want to clean you once. Stop doing this.
and then I have other snakes that like could not be neater. Like my female olive python is like the cleanest, tidiest snake of all time. Like she goes to the bathroom in the same general area all the time. And when she goes to the bathroom, she won't touch it, crawl through it, nothing. Like she's just cleaning her cage is a breeze. You just grab a piece of paper out, throw them out, change it. If she's on substrate, just drag this up, like. It's never a mess. So it's just weird how different animals operate.
Do you feed your snakes in their cage, or do you take them out?
Everything I've ever owned is eaten in its cage.
Yeah, me too. I only asked that, obviously, because that's, something you'll see when people newer to snakes come on. When I was newer to snakes, people told me, you go to the pet store, they tell you, make sure you don't feed in the cage because it'll be cage aggressive.
Oh, it drives me up a wall.
Yeah, I've not found that to be the case. If you have a defensive animal, they're just going to be defensive. If you have a nice animal, it's going to be nice, whether it eats or not in the cage.
And that's the problem, is that the people that believe that aren't smart enough to, or don't have enough experience. I shouldn't say not smart enough, because that's not fair, but don't have enough experience to read the animal's body language. So they don't even know why that animal's striking at them. There's a difference between feeding behavior, defensive behavior. Some snakes are just irritable. It's not even defensive. The fact is some snakes are just assholes. No matter what we tell people, there are some that are just jerks. Just like there's people that are jerks, there are snakes that just have an issue with everything and anything and just have to make sure that the whole world burns around them. It's few and far between, and I think a lot more people try to use that as an excuse than as valid. Most people don't want to put in the time and effort, and then keepers just don't realize how much like their nervousness or their mannerisms are affecting the behavior of their animals. And I think that's the biggest thing with the moving to feed thing. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is you talk to these people and they're convinced in their head that this is real, but you can convince them to try it. And so they'll start feeding the snake in the enclosure. But now when they're going into the enclosure, in the back of their mind, they're still convinced that this is real. So their approach has changed and they don't even know that it's changed. And so now the snake does start biting because they're coming in differently and they're telling the snake something's off. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where these people are like, well, nope, see, now I'm feeding it in the cage and it's being cage aggressive, but they're not realizing they're hesitating a little bit when they're reaching in now, or they're reaching in with their left hand instead of their right hand now. And these animals are smart enough to realize when things are different and when things feel off. And so if you have a snake that's already an edgy animal or a little on the higher strung side or whatever the case may be, now this little bit of change can be enough to basically create a problem that never existed. And trying to explain that to people, they just don't listen. So it's kind of a dead end street most of the time.
And I have to say, if your animal is already defensive as is, moving it to feed it is, for the ones that I have that are super defensive, moving it to feed it would just be the dumbest idea ever, because I'm going to hype it up more than I need to. And then if it eats, it's probably going to be staring at me, you know, watching me the whole time. So it's probably not going to eat. And then if it does and I have to move it back, that's going to be a whole issue. And then I'd be afraid about regurg because there'd be so much movement. There'd be flailing around. You know, the Borneo's doing the alligator roll type of thing. You know, like that's so much activity. There are some animals that you can feed and you can just move back into the cage and it's fine and it's no problem. You know, people talk about not handling after eating. Like if it's just something like that, you know, that's going to be okay. But that excessive movement that they're going to do, I'd be so worried that it would regurg. And if you've ever smelt a regurged animal,
it's not pleasant.
It is a different level from just a dead and decaying animal. It is different.
Yeah. And then there's different levels of regurg. Is it right away? Is it 3 days later? There's different levels of that, because the
or the regurg that's just like bones and fur. Have you had that before?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. At least those smell, but they're not overpowering like when the whole item comes back up.
Yes, this is true.
But what's annoying is it's enough of that smell where you know it's somewhere in the room, and then you're trying to figure out where it is, and it's always some little tiny smear.
And they hide it under their paper.
Yeah, it's underneath a piece of paper. So you're looking, like, where the hell is it coming from? I went through.
It's like you look in the cage and it's not there. You're like, okay, you're good. And like, I just looked through everyone. Where is it?
Yeah. Or they're sitting on it and you don't realize it, you know, and it doesn't look like it. Oh, it's brutal. And then they want to fight you over it. It's like, well, you didn't want it to begin with, so.
Right. Something I do want to say, since I brought up regurgitation, is that if your animal does regurg, I won't feed it for a good couple weeks, because that really puts an imbalance to their internal digestive system and causes a lot of havoc. So you want them to kind of calm down and then give them a smaller meal for the next time that you feed them, just to make sure that they're okay and good to go.
Yeah, for sure. And then if you have access to frozen thawed, a lot of times frozen thawed is a little bit easier to get down, you know, because it's already started a little bit of a breakdown at some point as opposed to a live prey item. So you're just a little bit ahead in that process and aiding that animal in digestion. So that can help if you're trying to deal with an animal that has regurgitation issues and you've given it the time. That's something you can do. You know, a smaller meal that's already started to break down is a lot easier for them to process.
That makes sense. Overall. Didn't think about that, but that makes sense to me.
Yeah. You know, and it's a pain when you have animals that have regurg issues, especially younger animals, because now you have to give them all that time between them. When they're younger, like, they don't bounce back with long breaks between meals. Like a healthy adult, you know, if that thing didn't eat for 6 months, it's still going to hang in there. But young hatchlings or stuff under a year old, they don't have that kind of window. So when they start regurging and do it, you know, 2 or 3 times in a row, now all of a sudden that's like 8 weeks before that animal gets a meal down, and that's a problem. So,
if I have a baby, well, baby up to 6 months old, if it regurges like 3 times in a row, I almost write that animal off. Like, I'll keep trying, but I'm not going to get my hopes up for that animal, just because like something is just not allowing this animal to do well. Yeah. And then further, I wouldn't want to, you know, send that animal to someone else, even if it did start eating well for me. I would be hesitant to sell that animal or use it for breeding, because something was wrong with the animal. I'd rather be breeding, you know, really strong animals that have good genes and are successful, you know?
That's why I have that little blue ghost here still, that little male, because he had regurgitation issues for like the first year of his life on and off. And he hasn't, knock on wood, in a long time, maybe once in the past like 2 years. But it's like I just didn't feel comfortable selling him to somebody, and then now he's just been here so long. It's like, well, now I don't want to get rid of him just because he's been here for, you know, 3 years and change now. Like, this is home to him. I don't want to uproot him. I thought about it. I actually posted on Facebook a while ago and said if somebody was looking for a pet only, I'd talk with them. But it's like, I don't know. I always feel bad. Once a snake's been with you a certain amount of time, like, they're adjusted, and the older they get, the harder it is for them to adjust to a new environment. So I always feel guilty about that.
And the thing I wonder about is when I say pet only, they might say, yeah, it's going to be a pet only. And then they end up breeding it anyway,
Mm-hmm.
or somewhere down the line it ends up getting bred. So if you don't want it to be bred, then you need to keep it because that's the only way you can control that.
Right. Yeah, and I have, there's one or two animals I have out in the world that were pet only, but the people that I sent them off with, I trust.
Like,
and,
legitimately, they're going to be pet only.
Right. Yeah. I've been to these people's houses plenty of time. I know them well. They're not even breeding their other animals anyway, so it's not like, in this case, they don't even have another one of it. So what are they going to breed it to? But yeah, so I try to do my best with that. And I absolutely promise, like, if I sold somebody a pet only animal and they gave me their word and they bred it, I would do everything I possibly could to ruin every day of their life. Like, there would be no question. I would ruin everything that I could possibly muster. I would spend every day of my life on social media making sure everybody knew. Like, I would absolutely go that, because at the end of the day, I don't. It's not because you violated your promise to me or your word to me, but it's because there was a reason why that animal shouldn't be bred, and you're putting your own BS ahead of that animal, and that I'm not gonna let happen.
Yep. If there was a new person, this is like, our conversations always go off on so many tangents, so I'm bringing it back. If you had a new person that wanted to get into bloods or short tails, and they asked you what was a good guideline for feeding, what would you tell them?
Well, now, of course, it depends on the animal they're getting, but let's assume that they're going to start with, an animal that's like 3 to 6 months old, something, in that range.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
At that point, you can feed that animal every 7 to 10 days. Those babies they're gonna do just fine. If you throw them a rat pup that often. As a general rule, if I see my snakes in blue, I don't feed them. Just to me, I know that the two most taxing processes they go through are shedding and eating. And so if I can avoid, combining those two, I do. That doesn't mean I've never fed a snake in shed. That doesn't mean I think you're a horrible person if you do. I just look at it as undue stress with two of the most taxing things going on in their body at the same time. So, once in a while I thaw food. I don't realize the snake's going into shed. You open the tub and now it comes flying out for food. I'm not going to be like, well, not today, so
Yeah.
We let it happen because that's going to create stress either way. If I take that food now from that animal that's in that mode, it's going to push, it's going to be upset. So, I do occasionally do it, but I try to avoid it. If I know an animal's in shed, I don't thaw food for it. I don't feed it. But yeah, so I would say you could start off on that schedule, and then when the animal reaches a year old, 18 months old, you start to evaluate how's the animal's body condition look. You're starting to get a little better feel at that point for the animal's personality and activity level. So is this one of those snakes that literally just sits there constantly, or is it one of those snakes that is curious about what's going on in the room, moves around a little bit more? You find it in front of the cage, back of the cage, over here, over there, whatever. And then you just adjust from there. And I also mentioned, I think last time and on that video, that I also just like to give these animals a period of time where they get a few weeks with no food, at least once or twice a year. Breeding females kind of automatically have a window worked in there where they're not going to eat for maybe 6 weeks. My males, like right now, I'm starting to feed them a little bit more right now than I do during the normal part of the season, and then come about mid-September, late September, I'm going to back them down. Same with the females. I'm just starting to hit the females hard that are going to breed this year, going into the breeding season, and and then I'll back them off once they start getting paired up. I still feed throughout breeding, obviously separated. I don't feed the males and females in the same cage, so I'll pull them out, feed them, give them a week or so, 2 weeks, whatever it is, to chill, and they'll go back together at some point. But yeah, it's just a lot of it is trial and error. Play it by ear. Pay attention to your animals, and hopefully in that year or 2 years where you're evaluating changing up your feeding schedule, you're getting more and more knowledge, you're paying more and more attention to how every meal affects your animal's body tone, how they look, the shed cycles they're going through, whatever it is. And at the end of the day, every animal is an individual with an individual metabolism. So you have a basis, but you really do kind of have to adjust to whatever's best for that animal.
And my general pattern, and this is very general and, varies between animals. You have some animals that hold on to the weight and some animals that don't.
Yeah.
What is my cat doing? Sorry. So for the first year and a half of the animal's life, I will probably feed it weekly. And then once it gets to a point when it's on medium smalls, that's when I will go to every 2 weeks or so. Sometimes I'll do it more because I just feel generous. Sometimes I do it less because I forget, or I don't have enough money to buy rats, or I missed the cutoff for the order, or whatever it might be.
That is the reality. The reality is I don't feed even as much as I intend to because you get busy and work's going on. I have over 100 animals right now. I work 50 hours a week. I commute. I have to take care of the lawn. I have to walk the dogs. I have to go grocery shopping. Sometimes you just don't get to certain things, and I'll admit feeding is the thing I hate the most.
And for adults, I don't worry about the adults if they, go off feed, but I will make a point to make sure I feed my babies up to, 9 months old. Once I get past the 9-month mark and they're pretty chunky and pretty good, then I can, not feed a couple more times and it's okay. However, with babies, I really don't want to miss a feeding if I, don't have to.
No, my adults... There's times where my adults, there's probably times where it's 6 weeks where I'm like, oh yeah, here you go. And they don't miss a beat. They don't notice.
Not at all.
No.
And then let's see, my 2-year-old, honestly, they're just the food size is different, but I'm basically doing anywhere from, do it a week in between, 3 weeks in between. My adult males, I generally will only feed once a month. I don't like my adult males to be very large. They're about the max I think I have is an 11-pound male. I think is my max. I think 11 or 12, right about there. And then my females, I keep it around 15-ish. So they're not really even that big either compared to some people that I've seen.
No,
I not say that that's wrong or not. You can have big bloods.
Yeah, well, I was going to say genetics obviously has a lot to do with that. So certain animals are just going to get larger, certain ones are going to stay smaller. I have, Raiden and my big T positive girl. The big T positive's over a foot longer than Raiden, and they both, have been raised basically the same, fed the same schedule. There's nothing different. It's just she's got bigger genetics. So Raiden is probably 5'6", 5'7", and the big T positive is over 6'8". So she's just a big girl. But even her, she's only 30 pounds when she's at breeding weight. Right now, she's probably 26 because she just laid eggs, not that long ago.
And I would say that big of a female is not. I don't think it's that common.
No,
someone was talking to me recently about how heavy they're going to get so big and they're going to be 6 feet long and 30 pounds, and I'm like, some of them sure, but I don't think that, from what I've seen, I don't think that's a normal.
And to me, 30 pounds at 6 feet is overweight. Like I said,
to me too, yeah.
She's 6'8" and she's 30 when she's going into a breeding season. When she has a season off, I keep her probably around 28 and a half. Just estimate. I don't really weigh my snakes anymore. I did weigh her a couple of times just because I was curious, and I weighed a couple babies this year because they came out of the incubator humongous, which are her babies, go figure. But they came out. One of them came out. I'm like, "Are you a year old?" I'm like, what's been going on in there? I had the first half of that clutch. 6 of the babies were over 100 grams. Those are big babies coming out.
Yeah. Wow.
And
that's nice to have big babies. That's
they're little spitfires. They're full of hate and size and wonderful combination. But yeah, so they surprised me when I opened that egg box, and I was like, "What the hell? Who snuck you in here? You didn't come out of this clutch." But yeah, and then I've had baby bloods come out at 50 grams. You just don't know what's going to come out. But
yep, and from the same clutch, you can have huge ones and small ones.
Yeah, this clutch has quite a bit of variance in size. I probably have a few that are 65 grams in there, give or take. I didn't weigh them, but just guessing.
Honestly, once you weigh a couple of them, you can kind of estimate size.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to adults.
I don't know. That's one of those things when you're like selling snakes that drives me crazy. People are like, what do they weigh? It's like, does it matter?
I
Like,
know. Oh my gosh, I
why?
know.
Why does that matter? Like, there's literally
I'm like, it's
no.
about this old and it's eating this prey item. That's about all I'm going
Yeah.
to give you.
There's literally no reason why you need to know the weight of a baby snake. Like, it's years away from breeding, so that doesn't matter. Um, you know, the only time like I would say that weighing snakes is useful is like if you suspect there's a problem and you're feeding that snake
Sure.
and it's not growing, and maybe you want to track and see, okay, this thing's losing weight slowly over time. Maybe there's a parasite problem. Maybe there's something health wise. So it can be useful. I'm not saying it's completely useless, but like there's no reason when you're buying a snake to ask how many grams it weighs unless you're buying like an adult snake that's around breeding size and you're trying to plan,
To gauge, yeah.
yeah, to gauge that. And even then, to be honest, like why are you doing that? That's a whole nother conversation for another time. But yeah, baby snakes, I just don't understand that obsession. It's such a weird thing.
So
And
I
don't
know with
where it
some people
started.
with ball pythons, they give a certain size prey item. This is
Yeah.
actually a good like transition to what I want to talk about too. But they would base it off of weight. Like I don't even know what it is because I
Yeah,
do
I've
not
heard,
do it this way.
yeah, I've heard people talk about that too. It's such a bizarre thing because like, how is that anything close to how they're feeding naturally?
Right. I don't know. Is it like 10%? Like I feel like it should be
I don't.
10%.
It's.
I don't
It's
know though. I
I
feel
don't
like that.
remember.
Yeah, I don't
Every
remember what
every
it
time
is.
anybody's gone that tangent, I just walk away. It's like, okay, you have fun talking about this.
Right.
No,
I always go, I don't weigh my animals in grams. I weigh them in pounds. Ha ha.
I do too because I bought the wrong scale when I did get a scale a long time ago, and I bought one that does ounces instead of grams. So I'm like, I'm not going to convert every time.
That's funny.
Yeah, yeah. So like those babies that came out of the incubator, they were like 3.4 ounces. I'm like, all right, now I got to crunch the numbers.
Oh god.
Yeah,
Oh, that's funny. Actually,
yeah,
quite
yeah.
funny to me.
Yep.
But based on, the size of food, we talked about, feeding schedules, how much, giving guidelines on that, the difference in fat content. We talked about that. But how do you know what size is a good size to feed your animal? When I first started keeping snakes, I was told that you want to feed a prey item no bigger than the biggest part of their body. I feel if I did that with bloods, I'd be feeding rabbits every time. So, what do you, like, what is your how-to guidebook or,
Yeah,
that's not right, but
that's one of those things I've really, to be honest with you, never thought about because I guess, and maybe I did once upon a time, but after nearly 20 years of working with animals, like it's just so second nature. Like I just have a plan in my head and just go with it, but I don't really ever think about, and plus having so many snakes, I basically have a freezer full of every prey item size you can imagine. So even when I acquire something, it doesn't really matter. I always have something here. The only time that it ever factored in, which is getting a little bit away from this, is when I got that male Cape York spotted python. And from the pictures, I thought he was like 3 times the size that he was. And he got here, and I'm like, oh shit, I need like 2-day-old pinkies, which I don't have because blood pythons and short tails come out of the egg eating bigger than that.
right.
So that was the only time that I ever had to scramble for food. And then he ended up literally getting out of the probe hole of the cage, and I never found him.
Oh God.
Yeah, and it was one of those things. Like I had this cage set up, and the picture, I swear to God, if you look at the picture, you'd think this snake was like 2.5, 3 feet. And then he came in and he was like fish bait. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, this person must have the smallest hands ever in the history of hands. And
I
like,
actually vowed to myself that I will never buy a corn snake under a year old.
yeah, oh, it's miserable. Like trying to keep track of that thing and keep
I
it
lose
in
them.
anything. Yeah.
I've lost 2 already.
Not only that, but like it's funny when I got that Thai bamboo rat snake, like if you gave me a choice of sticking my hand in that thing's tub or just sticking my arm in my adult female olive python's cage, I would go with the olive python because snakes that small, like I am so afraid to hurt them that like I don't know how to handle them. And it
I don't know how
intimidates
to get
me
you
in a
off
weird,
of me.
yeah, in a weird way. Like I'm afraid I'm going to crush you if I try to pick you up. I'm trying to like scrape you onto my hand. Like when I find ringnecks outside, I'm so afraid to hurt them touching them. I like try to get them to crawl into my hand on their own because I'm like, oh man, I'm going to smash this little thing. So I'm much more comfortable with larger animals with a little more bulk to them than I am with tiny colubrids for sure.
So what if, like, okay, I don't know, you bought a baby animal from someone
Hmm.
and it's about but no, we'll say the 3 month. It's about 3 months old, and you're feeding it rat pups.
Okay.
How do you know when you need to bump that up?
I guess I would just start to look at the comparison of that rat pup to the snake. And
Okay.
to me, like I always think like if a snake looks like it's struggling to coil a prey item because the prey item's too small, I think that's a sign that it's time to bump up the prey item size. Uh, and I vary size anyways within an animal, so even once I do bump them up, I still might throw them some smaller stuff from time to time, even when they're younger. I vary everything. So like my hatchlings, the first basically what I do with hatchlings when I get them is I give them two live meals to start, and that could be hopper mice up to small adult mice, depending on how big the hatchlings come out. Like these blood pythons, obviously, I just got small adult mice because they're
Mm-hmm.
huge. So a hopper mouse to them is just like they can't even, they go to bite it, it'll be in their mouth. It doesn't make sense. They can't coil it, you know? So I'll do two live meals like that, and then I switch them over to frozen. And sometimes the first time is successful. Sometimes they take a little bit to transition. And then I get them onto rat pups. And then once they're on rat pups pretty steady, I'll occasionally throw them a mouse again. I have baby quail. I'll mix in baby quail for them from pretty early age, get them up to the size where they can start taking, chicks from chickens. I'll rotate those in. Rats are definitely my predominant and main food source. Same reasons you discussed. It's the most available, most economical most of the time. So that's the basis of what I'm feeding. And then I mix in everything from there. And I don't have a schedule for mixing it in. It's just, when I'm thawing food, if I'm thawing food for a rack of 20 snakes, I might thaw 15 rats and 5 quail or chicks, and I'll feed a few here. And then the next time I do the same thing and I give the chicks and quail to a different snake. And
Sure.
just rotate it like that. So there's no real rhyme or reason to it. It's just as I think about it, I throw a few in every time and just do that. But yeah, I would say if you notice they're struggling to coil the prey item because it's really small, or if the prey item's in their mouth and it's just obviously dwarfed, and even the largest, it's interesting. You always hear that the largest prey item you should give them is like the largest part of their body, and then you see olive pythons eating crocodilians that are like 3 times their size. And,
Yeah.
you
They
know,
feel like they're
and
gonna explode.
yeah, and there's been some conversations because if you've noticed in captivity, a lot of these snake species are getting smaller and smaller. So it used to be very routine that most, boa constrictors were getting over 8 feet, and now it's like most are stopping at 5.5, 6.5. You see the occasional, larger sizes, but there used to be a lot of boas that were 10 feet plus. And you
Mm-hmm.
see them, you don't see them often anymore. Burmese pythons, a lot of Burmese pythons now, males are growing to 9 feet in captivity. Females are getting 12 or 13. Those females used to routinely get, 16, 17 feet plus, and the males used to get 15 feet. And, genetics obviously play a part in there, but there's some things that I've heard where people think because we're not ever challenging them with larger meal sizes, that there's no real reason for them to have to get bigger to overpower those larger meals or be able to take them down. And so I don't know, given what we know about how their genetic code is able to change itself based on food intake, then it's possible that maybe there's something there where their body doesn't tell itself to get that big because it doesn't feel like there's any need. And I don't know if
Potentially.
I don't know if anybody's ever thrown anything at that and tried that. And I'm not telling people that I suggest throw your snakes humongous meals, because a humongous meal is a risk factor. Something can go wrong. Not only that, but if your heat's too low and now that animal's not digesting fast enough, it can cause problems within their digestive system and make the animal sick if it's taking too long to break down, things like that. Whereas in nature, these animals can move and find the perfect microhabitat for what they need. In captivity, we limit them to a 2-foot cage, 3-foot cage, 4-foot cage, 6-foot, whatever it is. So no matter how much gradient we're offering, we're not giving them what the wild has, where they can find a habitat that gives them the security they want with the temperature they need, with the humidity that they need. There's endless availability out there of different microhabitats. So in their cage, they have to pick, well, I want this temperature, but that temperature means I have to be out, not in my hide. And so now they have to pick and choose between that security and that temperature and things like that. So I think we have to keep that in mind. And so that's why I don't push them with big meals, because there's just more potential for issue there. And I don't see the upside to it. I don't care if my snakes get huge, if that is the reason. There's I don't need 8-foot blood pythons. Like I just don't.
Right.
Especially angry ones, because when they're 6 feet and angry, it's a formidable animal. It's comparable with dealing with a 13-foot retic that's angry. They're powerful animals at a smaller size. So.
Have you ever accidentally fed like one of your juveniles something too big? I've done it where I've thawed, like, I don't know if I forgot how big my animal was or I don't know what, but when I pulled the stuff out to thaw and then I go to give it, I'm like, that's a lot bigger food item than I thought.
I've only had it with a juvenile maybe once, and it wasn't that the prey item was too big for the animal, but it's that Sumatran I have that has that kink in its neck. And so because the kink is literally right behind the animal's head at like a 45-degree angle, let's say, I feed it smaller prey items because it's got to squeeze it through that thing. And one day I just overestimated it. And by the time I realized that the animal grabbed it, and you're not getting it back at that point, but he trooped it down. Like I said, it wasn't too large for him. It was the same size as what his siblings were eating, but I just usually tried to give him something smaller. I did give a prey item too big to my big T positive girl, though. A friend of mine gave me some rabbits, and I thought it was a rabbit that she could take down. And, I pre-killed it and everything and gave it to her. And she spent like 6 hours on it. And I was like, oh, man, once I saw her struggling, I'm like, oh, man, but now I can't stop her at that point. But she was smart enough to realize it was too much for her and eventually gave up on it. And I just
left it.
Threw it in the woods for the coyotes. But yeah, I really, and to be honest, I think she could take it, but I don't ever challenge her with larger meals. And so I think that was part of the struggle. From a body standpoint wise, it was certainly smaller than the largest part of her body, so it would fit into that dialogue. But just her getting it down through her, down her throat basically was a little much for her. And like I said, I think part of it is I always feed her smaller meals, so her muscles aren't necessarily used to working that hard. So I think that came into play. I think if she had been out in the wild routinely eating larger prey items, I don't think she would have had a problem at all. But I'm just thankful that she figured it out. I was up all night. I fucking had my alarm set on my phone every half hour, going in and check on her. Yeah. Jeez. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, either get it down or spit it out. I don't care what you do, but
right.
Making me a nervous wreck watching, make sure her glottis is out and she's breathing and all that. But what do you do if she stops? It's really hard to get in there.
What would you do?
I mean, I would have to try to get in there and get it. I'd probably get some teeth in my hand, but whatever.
Yep.
And not her trying to bite me, but I would just have to peel back.
Yeah,
try to get in there. But try to massage it out or whatever. But no, she knew what she was doing, and she figured out her limit, and so good for her. And obviously she's fine now. She just had eggs and she's doing great. And this was like maybe 2 months before the breeding season, so I was like, oh, perfect. It's a nice big meal going into the breeding season. Rabbit's a good lean meat for them, so I was all about it. But it was just a little bit bigger than I guess she wanted to take.
I was thinking that I've pushed the limits, not meaning to. I don't push the limits with my adults. All of them get, larges or smaller, and varies. Sometimes they get small, sometimes they get large, sometimes they get medium, whatever, it varies. But the younger ones, I have overestimated the food size when I went and got it out. And it was probably like, it should have been eating a small, but this was like a medium small. You know what I mean? Just like a tiny bit bigger. And I was like, well, I'll try it, see what happens. Yeah. And sure enough, it took it down and it was fine and I had no problems. I mean, you're going to think I'm a terrible person, but part of me is like, well, if you spit it back up, then I knew it was too big,
Right. Yeah, no, and honestly, it depends on the species too, because like retics have an amazing metabolism for a larger snake, so baby retics can eat some pretty good sized meals. But also, when you're doing food trials with new hatchlings, prey size can affect whether they take or not. And sometimes with a baby that's not taking well, if you give them an item that almost looks too big for them, sometimes they'll take it. And I don't know what it is, but some of them that just seems to trigger it. But you got to think too, like, these animals naturally, they're not, there's not always, day old pink sitting around somewhere or whatever. Like they're muscling down something that they're overpowering somewhere. So, we probably baby them too much in certain situations. In other situations, we probably aren't as cautious as we should be. But I think when they're younger and have that higher metabolism, I think they can truck down some decent sized meals and be okay.
Yeah, I agree. Especially younger.
Yeah.
All right. So we're we're exactly at the hour mark at this point. Do you have any final comments that you want to give to the people listening about feeding?
I think we covered a lot of ground. Yeah. And it's funny. I remember talking and we're like, we're never going to be able to stretch this out. But I think this one went a lot better than last one. So hopefully the damn audio recorded this time.
I really hope. I'm literally getting off of here and like re-listening to it. I'm like, apparently Eric said you only got 7 seconds in last time.
Yeah, it's so bizarre, and I don't understand technology, but I could understand 0, and I could understand the whole thing. I don't understand 7 seconds.
Right, whatever, though. I did notice, actually. Well, okay, I'll talk to you after the recording. Anyway, okay, so back to the end of this. The last question that I give most people, but sometimes I forget, not gonna lie. If you had a new keeper, any new keepers, you were giving a speech, a talk to all the new keepers of blood pythons and shorttails, what advice would you give them? Brand new keepers.
Well, the first thing that I think is important is just making sure that you're getting the animal that's right for you. And a lot of people want to force animals to fit what they want. So people want like a great display animal. I don't think a blood or shorttail is the right choice. So making sure you're picking the right animal to begin with. And then get the animal that you want because it's going to be the one you're most passionate about. And, be open to advice, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, but try to do a little research and ask an intelligent question. Not that, hey, I just got this and tell me everything I need to know, because that gets old after a while.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yes,
it's like, show me something like, hey, I read this and it said, it should be at 88, and I read this that said it should be at 85. Which is it? Okay, that shows some effort.
Right, give me something to work with.
Right, let me know that you have actually put some time into this, and then I'll help you all day. But yeah, I think it's just be observant, and these animals will teach you as much as a good keeper will teach you. So if you're paying attention and you're in tune with that animal, it'll teach you a lot of things. It'll tell you when it's healthy, when it's content, when something's got it stressed out, how you're handling the animal. It's going to let you know how it feels about that. And that's my favorite thing with these animals is you can kind of feel what's going on with them when you have them in your hands. You can feel their body, how they're moving, how tense they are, how loose they are. And you can just really, really get a good sense of the animal that way. So I think people, that would be my best advice is just learn from your animal and learn from other people. And, always know that there's something more to learn.
Well, I like it. I think that wraps us up very, very well. Dan, where can people get a hold of you and what is your YouTube channel so people can get all that information you have on there?
So the YouTube channel and my Instagram are both Dan Magano Snakes. And Instagram is definitely a good place to message me. I typically get those. Facebook, people can message me as well. I try to respond to every single YouTube comment that I get in some fashion. There are some comments that I just don't even know what to say, so I just walk away. That does happen. But by and large, I try to at least acknowledge every comment on the channel as best I can and get to stuff in a timely fashion. And that's about it. Pretty soon, I'm sure I'll have some stuff listed within the next month or two. I've already had a couple snakes that are on their second meal already, and a bunch that have taken one. So pretty soon.
Awesome. Well, we definitely look forward to seeing everything that you have going on. And thanks again for being on this podcast with me and talking about food, because I love food.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Have a good night, Dan.
You as well.
Thanks everyone for listening. Please feel free to give me a follow on Facebook and Instagram at Bloods by Design. Tag me in your blood python photos at Bloods by Design, hashtag Strictly Shorties, so I can share all the awesome animals you listeners have. And if you have any questions, people you want to hear from, or topics to discuss, you can email those to bloodsbydesign@gmail.com. And of course, this podcast is supported by the NPR Network. If you want to get a hold of any of the guys at the NPR Network, you can email them at info@moreliapythonradio.com. You can follow them on all the socials and, of course, subscribe to the NPR Network YouTube channel. They have a Patreon where you can support all the NPR podcasts, just like this one, as well as merch. And all of that can be found on their website, moreliapythonradio.com. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll catch you next month for more Strictly Shorties.